In today's video, I'm going to show you the proper etiquette and the proper strategy on how to call arrows when you're not sure if it's touching the line or if it needs to be upgraded to the next score or not. And I'm going to take you through some very important principles on what you need to make sure you do and do not do when you're calling your arrows. So I'm in the middle of shooting my scoring round for the Kaminski Archery Backyard Championships with my trad bow here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that here in a second. But what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how to properly call arrows. There's a few things that you need to make sure you don't do, a few things you need to make sure you do as well to make sure that you're as fair as humanly possible when calling your arrows or when calling your opponent's arrows. Because ultimately you want to make sure everything is as fair and as unbiased as possible. Because there's a few things that I've learned throughout my years shooting archery is how to call arrows properly, effectively, and ethically to make sure it's as fair as possible. Before we get into that and showing you how to actually do that, I want to talk a little bit about the Kaminski Archery Backyard Championships. I've already got a video that I did launching the actual Backyard Championships. Links in the description below and a card at the top up there to check out in case you haven't seen that yet, because I cover a little bit more in detail. But in a nutshell, what this is essentially a bragging rights tournament where archers around the world can shoot compound recurve, barebow, or traditional style, male, female, indoor, outdoor, even youth, senior, and para rounds. Basically, we've got everything for everybody. We've got an exclusive Discord server that is attached to the tournament so everybody can share what they're doing and build a bit of a community around tournament archery. And when you end up submitting your score, you get an official sticker for the indoor round, for the outdoor round, and for the combined round total when you compete at both events. So what I'm doing is I'm in the middle of scoring, and I just shot an arrow here that's very, very close, and I'm not quite sure if it's a 7 or a 6. It's this arrow right here. Before I even get into how to call the arrows, let's cover basic etiquette of absolutely do not do's when you're calling arrows. Step 1 to do not do: don't touch the target. Don't touch the target face. Don't touch your arrows. Don't touch anybody's arrows that are on the same bail. Rule number 1 is do not touch the arrows under any circumstance, because when you do, you can easily affect where the arrow is actually sitting in the target. Because when you're calling arrows, it is how the arrow lies, not where the arrow might have been or where it tore the paper. Because if I pull down in this way, this direction towards me, that's going to be a 6. If I push it that way, it's going to be a 7. So step 1 is you don't touch it. It's really, really important. Step 2 is try to be as unbiased as possible. Try to call this as objectively as possible. What that does is it ensures fairness. So when you're calling other people's arrows in a target and it's in a tournament, don't use suggestive wording. When I say, hey, you might want to get a look at this arrow, there's no connotation there. There's no bias. If I say, hey, can you call that 7 for me? I'm planting that seed of it being a 7, and they may look at it and be like, yeah, it's definitely a 7, but is it? Is it a 7 or is it a 6? Same thing when you call over a judge. If you need verification because there's a dispute on your target, hey judge, can you call this arrow right here? Don't point to it, don't touch it. You can point to it, but don't touch it. You know, you always have that judge to call on if there's a disagreement on the target. And I would encourage you to do so because ultimately the judge knows these things. They should know these things that I'm covering here in this video today. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to want to take a look at that arrow. Again, not touching the target. So I'm going to check it from a few different angles and get very close to the actual target face itself. I don't have a magnifying glass, so I can't use that here today. But what I'm going to show you here is how to check it from at least multiple angles. I would suggest at least from 3 angles. Because then you get the best look possible on the arrow. So I'm going to reposition the camera and kind of show you what I'm talking about here now. Okay, so this is my arrow that I'm going to call. I'm going to do my best to get 3 different angles. And you'll see I can come down from here and kind of get a view from along the arrow where it would be very close to the actual shaft where it's touching or not touching the line right from this angle. So I'm getting down and kind of viewing from this angle. I want to view from this angle. And then the third angle, I may just kind of peek around it and see if I can get a good perspective on the actual arrow's impact. I'm going to do my best to reconstruct the line. This one, there's one hole here, so it's not yet too torn up for me to tell. Eventually in the video, as I'm scoring this, I'm sure I'm going to get one that's going to be close, and I will be sure to capture that to show you how I reconstruct the line and talk to you about very difficult arrows to call. This one's very simple, and I can see that from the angles, at least 2 out of the 3 angles, I can see that it is in fact touching the line. So what I'm showing you here is the actual arrow's landing location. You can see that the shaft is touching the black line on the actual red ring. Because it's touching that line, it is the higher scored value. It's always the same. All you have to do is touch the black line in order to have that highest score. The only exception is the blue. The outer blue, the 5 line, you have to touch the actual blue because there's no line from the black to the blue. Even though on some targets you can kind of see a ghostly line, it's not there. That doesn't count. You have to touch the blue itself. And when you go from 2 to 3, from this white to black here, you also need to just touch the black because there is no line there, obviously. So when you touch the line, you get that next scored value. And taking a peek from multiple angles is excellent. What you don't want to do is bump other arrows, and even bumping it like, you just don't want to come in contact with the arrow because then you're going to affect the actual result of where it is. And 1 point can make a huge difference. At least it can at certain tournaments. And I would encourage you to be as fair as humanly possible because this is one of those sports that can be 100% objective and there can be no messing around and influence of other people. It's just you and the bow and the target, and it's always the same for everyone else. So for our next arrow call scenario here, I've got one that has several holes in the target right where the arrow landed. This one right here on the middle left side. And also the target face is bulged a little right where the arrow is landed. So there's kind of compounding factors here, and I want to first explain to you how you should actually be scoring things. Is even if the target is wrinkled, it's where the arrow lies. It's where the target lies. So if the arrow is hitting a spot where the target's all pulled and puckered weird, sorry, wherever that line is, the arrow's value that it shows is the arrow value. You cannot reconstruct the target and lay it flat and all that stuff because you're not supposed to touch the target, right? So you got to make sure that when you are putting your target up, you're using pins. After you pull arrows, flatten the target face back out before you shoot your next end. It'll help prevent this scenario here. But you can see that there's an actual bulge in the target face, kind of where the 9 and the 8 ring is, and it's pulling the paper from the blue side towards that red side. So it's actually kind of moving in space those lines slightly to the right, and the arrow is on the left side, so that line is slightly pulled away. However, because the arrow is in the target face where it is, you have to call it like that. So I'm going to show you now from my perspective a few different angles, one from below, one from high, and another third one. I'm going to show you that third one first because on first glance you're like, ooh, that could be close. It could be an 8. But with the proper perspective from below, you can see it's very clearly out, and from above, it's very clearly out. So that arrow value is a 7 because of where it is in the target face. Could have been an 8 possibly if the actual face was flat. But where the arrow lies is how it needs to be called. And ultimately, that's really important detail to make sure you're not doing. Don't touch the target face to flatten it back out because you can't actually do that in a tournament. So there's a million different scenarios that I can give you as far as how to call arrows, things to look for, but the general principles still apply to every sort of variant that you're going to see. Ultimately, it comes down to don't touch the target. Don't touch the arrows. Don't touch your neighbor's target. If it's a different bail, doesn't matter. Do your best to not touch anything. Also, make sure you're as impartial as possible. Try to be as objective as possible and try to be as honest as possible as well. Be sure that you're getting as many views on the actual arrow as possible. So don't just look at it once. Look from at least 3 angles, especially if your first 2 angles conflict with each other. One says in, one says out. Do another one and use that as a tiebreaker. It's really, really helpful to do it in that order. And if you have a doubt, bring a judge over, but do your best to reconstruct the line as it was undisturbed, whereas if there was no arrow hole in it, but you're not allowed to flatten the target face out or reconstruct a line from a wrinkled face. That's on you, and you should have flattened the face to begin with. So make sure after you're done shooting, see how there's a little bulge right here in the target face. Can't quite see that, now you can. It's a little bulgy, so I might flatten it back out and anchor it down so it's a little bit flatter, because then there's going to be far less problems as the round goes on. So you'll see that there's plenty of arrow holes that are near the line, and there's plenty of scenarios where it almost is touching. You just have to reconstruct that line as best as you can. And I believe the rule is if 20% of the line is missing of the hole circumference, then you should replace your target face. But because of the score that I shot here with my trad bow, a 422 out of 600, if you're interested in watching me shoot this round here for the Kaminski Archery Backyard Championships, I'll have links down in the description below for you to check it out. But I didn't shoot a high enough score or tear it up the target face enough to warrant changing it at all. So I didn't have to, and it's going to stay this way, and I can probably get more use out of it because it's traditional style archery, not super precise, at least not at my level. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully it explains a little bit as to how to properly call arrows, how to ethically call arrows. Ultimately, it's just me, my bow, the target, and the arrows, and there's nobody influencing me, nobody affecting me, and ultimately I win because I shot well, not because somebody else had favors or paid somebody off or whatever it may be. There's no favoritism, and it's really enjoyable to be in this kind of sport.